Hello, my name is Moritz Plassnig and I'm the Chief Product Officer at Immuta.
Hello, my name is Kaj Pedersen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer with AstrumU.
Kai, great to meet you. I think to get things started off, it would be great to hear a little bit about your background and then we take it from there.
So how far back do you want to go? Essentially, I'm a software engineer by training, and so I started in this game as a software engineer many years ago, and have been fortunate enough to see many of the transitions that have happened in the industry. If you sort of take it, going back to mainframe to client server, from client server to the internet, and then from there moving into sort of a lot of the changes around data, and particularly large scale data, and being able to handle that at significant volumes. So, and fortunately enough, been in a situation where through that journey, I was able to adapt through different roles, and actually, believe it or not, starting in British Coal, but then moving into fintech, and then into the space of the internet, and eventually I joined AstrumU to tackle this problem with a skills-based marketplace, and figuring out how we can help people translate their verified skills into or their verified transcripts into skills, and help them ultimately understand where they were today and what was the gap that they needed to close to acquire additional skills, so that they could form decisions around pathways that we could make available to them.
What got you excited about AstrumU and ultimately made you decide to join the company?
It goes back to when I founded Urbana Software, and what got me excited about it was what we tried to do with Urbana Software was very similar, but looking at tests. And in this case, that we came up with a solution where we were able to take the distractors within a standardized test and translate that into an understanding of where the test taker had mastery, or what we could infer from them, from their results, and translate that back into recommendations so they could actually improve their ability to pass the test in SAT, for example, AP, etc. And the idea there was that we could actually also then translate that further down the road into skills. Unfortunately, at that time, and this is in 2001, the marketplace was very much driven by the publication side of the business. And so states would spend vast quantities of money on building the curriculum and all of the publications in support of the standardized test. And so somebody like us coming along and saying, well, actually, there's a better way to do this, and we can actually transform the industry, wasn't a palatable idea to the test-taking companies. So we found ourselves very quickly squeezed out. And so the opportunity, when I spoke to Adam, who founded the company, we actually spoke in 2017, but I was already committed to another company at that time, helped me realize that the technology had shifted so much, and that the value of education was really becoming the conversation piece for many individuals. And so if we could combine a tool that enabled individuals to understand where they stood in terms of their skills and competencies, and what they needed to do to actually pursue alternative pathways for success, that would be a game changer. And from that perspective, I think that's proven to be the case. If you look at higher education right now, it's in a place of dramatic change, because people are questioning the value of the degree, and a lot more businesses are looking for, well, can we find a diverse, underserved, employable marketplace that enables where we can see what their skills are, so that we can actually bring them into the workforce to help us meet some of the challenges that are coming up in today, and also down the road in the future.
Yeah, that's exciting. Can you tell us a little bit more about the business and how it works? Do you work with individuals directly, or with universities and colleges, or private employers? So can you give us a little bit more of an overview on how the business works and operates?
So our focus is clearly on the individual. What we're trying to do is build a profile around that individual in terms of where their skills are, so that we can sort of ascertain their hard skills as well as their soft skills to build a good competency model or a skills index around these individuals. However, the market's paid for by the educational side and also the workforce development side. And so what we found is that there are a number of educational institutions as well as other alternative educational players who want to offer programs that enable learners to come to them to close out their skills gap, if you want. And then on the workforce side, we've found that there's a lot of enterprises who are today grappling with the unemployed, sort of the access to the employable talent that they need. And they also want to do it in a way that enables more of an underserved community to get into the workforce. And so what we've always thought about is if we can actually help both the workforce side and the education side talk to each other, translate what the kids are being taught or what the individual's being taught into something that the workforce side wants, then that actually solves a big problem, because we can bridge the skills gap. And that in essence is what we're trying to do at the individual level, with the other two sides of the marketplace paying for it.
Yeah, I dropped out of school, so this is music to my ears. I thought I wouldn't learn what I need to learn to be successful. So you mentioned that you're building those profiles, which to me sounds like there's a lot of data involved. So how are you leveraging data and to build those profiles, and how does all of that work from a technical point of view?
So at the heart of our stack is Databricks, which is essentially our analytics engine. And what we've done is we've built a number of tools to support the ingestion of data. And that data we pull in from institutions, schools. We can also pull it in from HRIS systems, SIS systems. So SIS, Student Information Systems, obviously HRS is the Human Resources Information Systems. But we can also look at other data sources, and so we do pull in what I call exhaust data. So data that comes from LinkedIn, for example, or other public sites, enable us to get a full view of an individual. We sort of see our learners, and that's what we refer to as the individuals, on sort of three levels. There's what we call the potential learner. That's somebody that's in the system. We know that they're there, but we haven't verified them. And so what we do is then the next stage is sort of that verified learner. And that's where we have an understanding of who they are. We know essentially based on our data and also sources of information that we may have got from somewhere else that this is the person we think it is. And so they become verified. And then we have what's called the active learner. And the active learner is somebody who's now engaged with our system and actually beginning to use it. And so, as you can imagine, because we're tracking information at that individual level, we have an obligation to also protect and secure the information as it comes through our system, which includes, by the way, when we work with customers, being able to show them that their data, when it's delivered to us, is returned back to them. And so, this whole idea of tracking data lineage is an important piece, as well as the security of that data and who has access to that data. So we can ultimately demonstrate to our customers that we are treating their data with respect. And this is not just the paying customers either, by the way. It's also for the individuals that are using our system or are on the platform.
Yeah, it sounds like you're getting data from individuals, and those individuals, right, you're governed ultimately under privacy regulation that's out there, but then also you're getting data from various partners and companies. So I assume there are some data sharing agreements in place. Can you talk a little bit about that and how the data governance around those agreements work?
It's funny, back in the day when I first started in this business, nobody really gave a damn about their data. We're in a different world now, and rightly so, by the way, rightly so. And privacy is really at the heart of every transaction we do. So we have obligations with our customers where we have a data sharing agreement with them, where we make it very clear, and this is our privacy promise, as we call it, that they own the data. At the end of the day, they own the data, and at some point, if they choose to have that data returned to them, we will return it back to them. And we also have some obligations in there in terms of securing that data and monitoring it. And the way that we do that is having an independent party come in and audit our security controls within the company, and that's our SOC 2, obviously. In many regards, that sense of ownership around the privacy mindset is one of the hallmarks of what we have within our team, and we continually train them every month, and we continually look at ways to make sure that the data as it comes in is protected and secured in a way that only the people who have access to it get access to it. And if the customer chooses to have it back, they will have it back.
Yeah, you mentioned lineage in that context, right? Data is coming maybe through one pipeline that is tied to a data sharing agreement and then is used in a certain way and transformed, maybe merged with other data. How are you tracking all of that? What are the challenges of doing that, especially as a startup, right? I assume you have limited resources, right? So you want to adhere to all the regulations. You have a brand you want to protect. You take privacy very seriously, but the problems you're trying to solve, they don't sound easy. So how did you go about solving those?
So what actually ended up happening is we came to this conclusion that, and one of the mantras we have in the company is that technology should be treated as a tool for serving. And so, if we can make our technology as a servant, a couple of things can happen. One, we can sort of improve the reliability of the services that we're offering. We can ensure that our team is more productive because they're not dealing with mundane tasks all the time. And the same can be applied to security. And so this is what got us looking in the marketplace at the time, and we were looking at a number of players, and that's how we got introduced to Immuta. For example, as we realized that Immuta had this capability to support data lineage, which actually surprisingly not many tools at the time had that offering. They could also give us role-based access control. So that was important to us because at the end of the day, I only want a certain cohort of the organization actually looking at the data, which is PII, and I want to know who they are. And so we sort of religious about that. And for example, our sales team want to go out and sell our product, and they want to show people how the product works. And as a SaaS company, that's clearly an important obligation, but we can't show PII. So using some of the tools where we can shade out that information, and we can also enable our sales team to work with the platform without exposing or risking PII, made it a very sort of simple choice for us to look more deeply at Immuta. And because Immuta actually gave us those controls and enabled us through their platform to actually, and this is in the early days, sort of sit on top of Databricks, and allow us to kind of manage all of those activities using technology. That was in my book, a good solution, and ultimately led us to the partnership that we have today. Now, the good news is that you guys have also started to really embed yourselves within some of the capabilities of Databricks, and interestingly enough, when we looked at the decision, I had an inkling that at some point, sooner or later, Databricks and Immuta would find a way to partner, primarily because Databricks wasn't necessarily getting into the level of security that we needed. And so I always saw that alignment as something that would happen, and it did. And I continue to remain, excited about the possibilities that will come out of that as that partnership develops.
Yeah, how did you first conclude that you need a solution like Immuta? Did you try solving the problem in-house initially, or did you do your research and just with your experience you knew right away that there's no way that this should be done in-house, right? It's important, but it's also as a startup you always have to prioritize where do you spend time and what's really where should really your engineers spend time on. So how did you make the decision initially?
So it's a combination of things. One is, when you're first starting out, you're obviously reluctant to spend too much money because you want to try and squeeze out as much value as you possibly can for every penny that you spend. And so we started building our own tools and our own capability. But we realized that very quickly that wasn't a scalable solution. And the other thing I've learned as I've grown up in the technology world is that you have to always be thinking about how you accelerate as well. So not only are you trying to, first of all, prove that you have something that's valuable, you then have to develop it in a way that it can be scaled and it can be performant. And now there's this sort of other tier, which is it has to be secure. And partnerships are a great way to help you do that. And if you deliberate and thoughtful about the partnerships in terms of the strategic impact it's going to have for you as a business, then I think it's a win for the ecosystem as a whole. And so that's one of the reasons why, not too far into the journey, when we were sort of trying to figure out how to develop our own solutions, it became apparent to me this is something where a partnership made more sense. And then we did the due diligence of actually going out, looking at the marketplace and seeing who would be the better partner for us, and who could actually offer us what we needed today, but also had a roadmap that indicated a longer term thinking, so that as we grow, we're also benefiting from the growth of our partners, in this case Immuta, but also other partners that we've been associated with.
But how would you, now looking back and having some experience with Immuta, how would you describe the value and the ROI of Immuta? Can you even measure that? And if so, how would you do that?
I think there's sort of, in my mind, there's three areas that we can measure it. One is obviously in terms of just the productivity piece. The fact that we can actually use less people to support the security of our data across the platform, because we're benefiting from Immuta's team, and we can actually tap into that and engage with it. So that's a productivity component to it. The other piece is the security side. Security is changing all the time, and we have our own sort of security requirements and needs that we have to stay on top of. So it's always comforting to know that you have a partner who's also got their requirements and security needs that they're staying on top of. And then through the SOC 2 sort of relationship, we can hold each other accountable for making sure that the primary objective of securing data, as well as delivering on the promise of that, is maintained. And so I think that piece was kind of a nice one as well. And the third one is ultimately it comes down to cost. And the productivity, the security pieces are all important. But if I was to look at the cost of trying to do what Immuta does for me today and build that in-house, the cost would impact me in a number of ways. One is just there's the dollar cost, which I think would be prohibitive for us to be successful. But then there's the cost of not getting to market on time, losing that ability to accelerate and scale. And so those are the three criteria that I would look at when measuring the value of the partnership.
That's great to hear. How does your broader team think about data security and data privacy? Because in my experience, right, you mentioned companies take data privacy and security more seriously now, which is great. But I've seen it change a little bit over time, right? Where in the past, there were certainly companies that did much more with data than they should have. And now we have better controls in place and regulation, all of that. But it also is like a little bit prohibiting, right, the data scientist, the data engineer to maybe move as fast as they can, because they need to think about, well, should everybody be allowed to see this data? Should I mask it? Should I do this? Should I do that? Do I need to ask for approval, or maybe state under which purpose I'm using this data? How does your product team feel about that? And how do you keep them educated on how the expectation in the industry and from your customers is evolving, and the need for taking data privacy seriously is also, in my opinion at least, increasing and becoming more important in the broader marketplace?
Well, fundamentally, we don't get any deals done if we don't take care of our security and privacy. It's really that simple. I mean, the funniest thing is aligning my sales team to SOC 2 and all the requirements under SOC 2 would have been difficult if I couldn't show them the direct link to, if you want to close that deal, we have to be SOC 2. You better do your homework. And so if you've got your sales team understanding the value of security and privacy, then it's not such a hard equation or a discussion to have with the rest of the organization. And so I think role-based access control is perhaps the easiest way for us to manage that. We know that, and under our governance structure, we know which group. So let's just say data science, for argument's sake. There's a group of this group here has this level of access. Now, if somebody in that group is no longer required to have that access, we'll move them to the appropriate group. But because we can manage it at group levels, we can move people in and out, and we can then simplify the change management side of it, where you have to document all of that. It's easier to do that. And it's all about how do you manage the evidence in a way that's efficient, and ultimately how do you also help people understand why they have to go through these hoops. Now, if you also add in on top of that the education and the training, which is what we do, and then we couple that with what I referenced earlier, our privacy promise. Everybody in our company has to sign their privacy honor statement. So partnerships with Immuta and others that we have to help us stay on top of that enables us. This is the aim, enables us to stay ahead of the bad actors as best as we possibly can, leveraging the best practices and the partnerships that we have in the marketplace.
Yeah, if I look at you and compare you to other companies I met over the last couple of months, I think it's fair to say that you're very mature when it comes to just working with data and data governance and data security and privacy, because it seems like you have the culture, right? Your company, your team takes the subject seriously. You have the right technology with Databricks and Immuta, and you have the right processes in place and the controls in place. So it sounds like you did like many things really well. I bet the journey wasn't always that easy. So do you have any advice to companies that are maybe not as far along, maybe a company that's still migrating from an on-premise legacy data store to the cloud and is just trying to figure out, well, how can we leverage our data better and protect it at the same time? Do you have any advice from going?
It's a journey. It's a journey, and you got to just keep iterating. And I'll be honest with you, we still have work to do, and and that's the thing about security. It's a constant work in progress. And so I think if you understand that you're on a journey of 1,000 miles, the first thing you need to do is just take the first step, and then keep taking the next step, and keep taking the next step. And you don't have to be perfect out of the gate, but what you do have to have is a sense of value around security. And that's the important piece, is it's got to be instilled into the culture of your organization. Everybody has to be mindful of what they're doing with somebody else's data. And they have to really understand that that person's data it should be treated like it's your data, and have the mindset, or the empathy actually is the most important thing. Have the empathy that if that data that you're dealing with should be leaked, how would you feel if somebody did that with your data? And also recognize that sometimes the worst security breaches happen because of somebody who is in your organization. And it could be deliberate, but in most cases it's an unfortunate situation where they may have been phished without realizing it.
Yeah, shifting topics a little bit. When you talked about your background, right, you mentioned a couple of big, right, technology changes, right, the internet, the cloud. We're going through another one, at least that's my opinion, with Gen AI, large language models, and everything around that. And what's your opinion there? And I know it's a broad question, so let's maybe start in the context of security. You just mentioned phishing, right? And I think phishing attacks and large language models, my opinion is it will only get worse, right? There will be only more sophisticated attacks because of that technology, but at the same time, I'm also super bullish on what the technology can do for us. So what's your opinion on? Do you think it is this game-changing right technology shift, or is it just another iteration of, we have been on this AI ML journey for a long time? What's your opinion on it?
There's a whole swath of capabilities that are coming out of it that are going to develop. And yes, there are going to be some bad actors who'll try and take advantage of it. But I think there'll also be other people on that side of the equation who will try and figure out how to innovate and make it better and make it a solution that's for good, versus the people who are going to make it as a solution for bad. The thing that I am concerned about, however, when it comes to AI, is I think we're starting to already see larger companies and frankly government regulators coming in trying to control and manage the environment before it's actually fully fleshed out. That is a concern to me, because that's basically essentially you're being that's captivity by regulation, and the only people who benefit from that are the people who are either in government or the people who are the big companies that have been paying the government to do the work of creating this legislation. That doesn't mean that it's we should lose sight of the value of privacy and making sure that the ownership of data, et cetera, is attributed to the people who created it. But there's still room for us to figure out what that means. There's room for us to try and learn from how we take advantage of the technology so that the creators benefit, that the people who are going to use it to improve our society and make it more productive benefit, and that the people who are going to sort of think about it from a security side also benefit. As soon as you start to lock things down, you kill the innovation. And without the innovation, I think you'll end up stunting our ability to really understand where we can take AI.
Yeah, I'm with you with that on that. I think it's funny that when you look at how large language models became so popular, it was through a startup, right? Mm-hmm. And now that same startup is also pushing very hard for regulating it now that they are the market leader, at least for now. So always interesting to see how quickly things change, right? Yeah. Thanks for doing that. Any last thoughts, any other topics you want us to cover? I know we talked about quite a bit, but I want to make sure we get everything in.
The thing I want us, everyone, to walk away from is realize that the way that we think about computing now has changed, right? The old model used to be data, the modules that sort of the models around the data, and then the application. So it's always been this sort of three-tier view around computing. I think there's a fourth tier now, which I call safeguarding. It's this idea that you have to safeguard everything. And the simple truth is that if you want to be a business in the future, particularly a business around data, you have to keep that safeguarding aspect in consideration of all your decisions. And then you have to do it in a way that allows you to take advantage of leaders in the field. And so if you can partner with people who can help you accelerate and safeguard data, I think everybody wins. And ultimately, this is one of the reasons why AstrumU's always enjoyed having the partnership with Immuta.
Awesome. That's a great way to end. I appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.